If I had a nickel for every time a Bob-omb had a tragic backstory in a Paper Mario game on Switch, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right? Welcome to Dark Aspects of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door Part 4, where I'll be investigating chapters 5 and 6 under a magnifying glass, like the improbably large-brained Pennington. As I alluded to from the jump, we've got to start things off with sad aspects, as Admiral Bobbery, the last member of the Mario crew, has some major trauma that needs to be worked through before he can help others save the world. You see, the next crystal star is revealed via magical map to be somewhere on the haunted isle of Keelhaul Key, all the way across the ocean. There are no kind talking whales Mario can ride this time, and despite being a great swimmer, he's no Junior Troopa, so the only way is via a vessel that's a little more grounded, or floated in reality. Either way, it's a boat, and the butte we're taking is owned by the rich and foppish Flavio, who'd love to tag along with Mario, or rather make Mario tag along with him, because let's be real, he's the true main character, on an adventure to shake up his life that's been rather uneventful as of late. Flavio is no helmsman though, and his navigator ran off, likely because of the many unsavory rumors about their destination. Evil curses and vengeful spirits, ships that have sailed out never to return. Some dock workers are scared to even say the name Keelhaul Key out loud, knowing that the ghost of the dread pirate king Cortez might be listening. A new master helmsman is going to be needed to steer everyone through the deathly dangerous waters leading to the cursed land. Luckily, such a seafarer has surprisingly settled down in Rogueport. Bobbery, a once legendary sailor who became a ground-bound recluse after his wife Scarlet passed away some time ago. He pretends not to be Bobbery at first, though to be fair, I wouldn't give any information out to some random people who stumbled into my living room through the chimney either, and tells the intruders to get out. He's not very forceful about it though, because you can just not listen and enter his suspiciously nautically decorated study instead, then steal his shine sprite. I feel like he's the type that'd ordinarily not hesitate to blast these thieves into next Wednesday, but right now, the poor old guy is tired and just wants to be left alone without having to deal with the confrontation. I'm about to get real for a moment here, but I've felt this kind of lethargy before when I struggled with depression as an older teenager. It can leave you in a state of resignation where your other emotions sort of shut down. So you really only feel empty and act unresponsive in situations where another person would be angry, for example. A traumatic event can especially inhibit one's emotional range, which I imagine is what Bobbery is going through with the loss of his wife. The old Bob-omb is coping by pushing everyone else out, choosing to live in isolation because he feels he deserves it. You see, Scarlet suddenly succumbed to an inexplicable deathly illness while he was out at sea, which meant that Bobbery wasn't there to possibly nurse her to health. Because of this, he blames himself for her passing. In his eyes, he put the love of his profession before the love of his life. And so in his guilt-ridden grief, he embraced self-punishment by swearing off of sailing forever. The pervasive thoughts that he could have saved her began tormenting Bobbery at night, haunting his sleep. But for the sake of morality and game progression, Mario can't choose to let the dejected old soul be, resulting in Podley, Bobbery's old friend, the barkeep who was by Scarlet's side on her deathbed, giving Mario a letter she wrote to Bobbery just before leaving this world. This Super Mario world. Sorry. Now, a lot of TTYD fans do not like Podley, and honestly, looking back through this cutscene, it's easy to see why. Scarlet was very specific in life, and entrusted Podley to hand her husband the letter should she pass away without seeing him again, and if Bobbery winds up blaming himself for her death. Both of these fears came true, but instead of respecting her final request and directly delivering these last words to her husband, Podley took it upon himself, without even knowing the contents of the note, to keep it from him because he didn't want to risk adding to Bobbery's misery. From my perspective, I do agree that Podley was absolutely in the wrong here. However, I can understand his hesitation, especially since we don't know the true extent of Bobbery's emotional state upon first hearing the news. Obviously, he was in shock and distress, but what if it were even worse than that? It's not at all a stretch to believe that if these characters were real and not living in a Mario game, that Bobbery could have been having thoughts of ending his own life. Perhaps Podley worried that relinquishing the letter too soon would push Bobbery to make a decision he wouldn't be able to come back from. Do remember that Podley was a close family friend Scarlet trusted enough to assign this vital task to, so he has to know Bobbery and his history better than we ever could simply parsing what little backstory we're given. That being said, it doesn't excuse Podley's choice to safeguard the message in secret. He didn't want to take any sort of chance, so he intervened and it wound up being the wrong move. Scarlet's voice of reassurance is something that Bobbery really needed to hear sooner rather than later, but Podley gatekept this step to the old sailor's recovery against Scarlet's wishes. Podley may have had good intentions, but his meddling left Bobbery in a despondent stagnation for who knows how long. I always assumed the span of time between then and now to be many years. Scarlet mentions in her letter that her life was short, so if Bobbery is an old man in the present, and if they married somewhat young, she could have passed decades ago. Podley might have inadvertently ruined a considerable chunk of this man's life. As you'll soon learn too, Podley is a terrible decision maker overall when it comes to the loved ones in his life. Podley's ex-girlfriend Eve from Twilight Town, for example, never truly recovered from her broken heart after he dumped her. And the lack of a resolution still bothers her to this day, so much so that she's now asking for help on a community bulletin board at the Rogueport Trouble Center. Eve explains that the two were once deeply in love, and had a happy, shabby life together roughing it out in a small apartment. They both dreamed to be stars of the musical stage, but when Eve finally had a breakthrough and was offered a role as leading lady in a prominent play, Podley left her without saying goodbye, leaving behind only a crass, quickly scrawled note that said, "My dear, I would only dim your bright future. Farewell." Of course, this clumsy breakup caught Eve off guard. Her dream wasn't to be a star that shines alone. Success meant nothing to her without her partner, and so she didn't even show up to the rehearsal. Eve gave up on her dreams and tried to forget about her lover. She wound up marrying another man and found a different kind of happiness living as a mother. Though, after hearing a rumor that Podley was running a Chocola shop in Rogueport, she had to at least see her first love again after all this time. But you know what? Podley couldn't even do that for her. He pretends that he knows no such person, and simply requests that Mario tell this Eve person to live in the moment before shooing him away. It's only under his breath that he mutters, "Oh, my Eve." Clearly, he hasn't forgotten about her, but that's the message he wants relayed. So Eve will likely live the rest of her life thinking that her complicated, nostalgic feelings are one-sided. She will be much happier if you choose to make something up quick and tell her the feelings are mutual, which is actually closer to the truth. But I think the first option is still best, as the man is kind of an asshat, so let's let him burn his bridges. Eve, you're better off without him. That's enough side questing though. Let's get back to Bobbery and his late wife. Quote, "Though you will mourn, I beg that you remember that time, like love, is a tide. You are one with the sea, as you were one with me. Do not lose both your life's loves." Unquote. Upon finally reading these validating words, Bobbery takes a moment to collect himself in private.
Cue the explosion noise.
And takes the next step to healing by agreeing to make the ultimate voyage. Mario and many other NPCs with their own reasons to leave Rogueport are now bound for Keelhaul Key aboard Flavio's rather expensive ship. A neat little quirk of this chapter is that it begins and ends with diary entries written by the eccentric trader himself. Things are literally smooth sailing until the third night, where his tale of battling a man-eating sea serpent is interrupted by blue flame spirits inspired by Onibi, demon fire yokai of Japanese folklore, simply called embers here. After the first of these fiery ghouls looms over poor Papacha's shoulder, storm clouds form overhead and more specters begin taking shape, bringing with them an ominous fog that obscures the waters ahead. Not before long, an entire horde of embers surround the adventurers and cause Flavio to nearly pass out in terror. Bobbery tries to keep everyone calm, but the ghostly oohing things are quick to send him overboard. Next is the totally not Lord Crump in disguise, followed by a toad, and then everyone as the boat's torn apart and sinks into the drink. Thankfully, because they were all so close to their destination, they all wash up on Keelhaul Key, but someone is missing from their group. Someone very important. Where's the green toad? Flavio mourns this friend, along with Four Eyes and Admiral Bobbery, 3 lost souls assumed to have been taken by the ghostly Pirate King. Enough time passes that the shipwrecked crew constructs a semblance of civilized life on the island using the boat's flotsam, surviving on whatever supplies the seafloor hasn't yet laid claim to. Washed up timbers provide protection from the elements, while everyone subsists on soggy sea salty bread. Including the 3 days and 3 nights spent sailing, it's been about a full week from the initial departure until the time the player is able to take control of Mario once again. With still no sign of Bobbery or the others, the known survivors have grown a bit restless and begin arguing, then threatening each other with violence. The future is uncertain, but things are looking pretty grim as the not-so-friendly neighborhood ghosts continue to torment the hapless foreigners. Mario is voluntold to explore this eerie place, and he eventually does find a roughed-up Bobbery on the verge of death, or so it seems. He reportedly sacrificed himself to save his fellow crew members, and makes one last request before his final rest: a sip of vintage red, or Chocola-Cola in the US version. This spirited beverage is Bobbery's last memory of Scarlet he was initially saving to celebrate their arrival on land. He's coughing, hacking, and moaning while struggling to even speak, as evidenced by the shaky text. So if you weren't spoiled by the promotional video ads revealing him to be a full-fledged party member, you'd be inclined to believe that this character is going to be joining his wife soon. Upon finding and delivering the treasured bottle, Bobbery says his supposed last words and slowly shuts his eyes. The wheel on his back even stops turning, and attempting to speak with him again reveals nothing but dots. A smack of Mario's trusty hammer ought to change that. One swift blow to the cranium wakes Bobbery from his delirium, and our latest party member joins the cause. Speaking of hitting living persons with hammers, I think now's a better time than ever to speak about Waka, a talking, infectiously chipper blue mole returning from the Nintendo 64 Paper Mario. According to the wise Russ T from that game, Wakas have sadly become an endangered species because they've been hunted for the valuable, edible Waka bumps they drop when hit. The Waka on Mount Rugged is said to be the last one, and the player can actually make it disappear forever from their save file if they get too greedy. Waka bumps are incredible healing items after all, and they do sell for lots of coins. The only Waka left in TTYD's world lives here on Keelhaul Key, and the player can similarly abuse the innocent creature for its precious yield until it seemingly vanishes for good. Waka clearly doesn't enjoy being hit and asks you to stop, but ignoring his basic rights and attacking him repeatedly doesn't seem to have any obvious consequences until the 5th bonk. After that, the little fella will no longer speak clearly, with ellipses breaking up his sentences. He mentions getting headaches as of late, and Waka forgets who Mario is. In fact, he's no longer confident he knows his own name. So, at this point, even if the player stops, it's implied they've already inflicted a traumatic brain injury upon this protected animal. The cruel thing is, though, the game encourages you to do it. And the Switch remake is even worse, for reasons I'll get into at some point. For now, just know that the player's morality is challenged in an unexpected way with this, mechanic. Despite Waka bumps being some of the best consumable items in the game, I honestly could only stand to get one of them because I felt bad hitting the guy. This was before knowing that the developers added a little extra something if you play Whack-A-Mole one too many times, so my initial kindness wound up not mattering because, like with Undertale, my determination to 100% a game will always outweigh any moral lesson said game is trying to teach me. Let's leave behind the mole with a migraine for now and head into the deepest reaches of the Pirate's Grotto. That's, funnily enough, right on the other side of the wall where Waka hangs out. To reach that special area, we have to get Mario afflicted with a deceptively helpful curse that allows him to fold into a paper boat by the spirit of an ancient Koopa hero trapped inside this black chest. I've spoken about these 4 quote-unquote chest demons at great length in part 1, but I wanted to mention while we're here that this time, Mario asks to be spared the theatrics and just given the cool new ability disguised as a hex. The demon is sad that Mario is unsurprised and doesn't want to hear the speech he's been practicing for a millennium, calling him a twisted little guy for it. Of course, Mario shakes his head yes in response. Wait, what? But has to sit through the usual spiel again anyway. This interaction is my favorite of the 4 for this reason, and because after shouting "Suffer" 3 times in all caps, he dials it back and with a look of grave concern says, "Wait, that's maybe too much. Are you alright? That didn't really hurt, did it?" Only after checking to make sure he didn't go too far does he laugh and start hurling ridiculous insults once more. Then, when it's all over, he thanks Mario for letting him put on his show, and the last of the old heroes is finally freed. All that's left now is to sail onward into the den of the Pirate King, his dusty old ship containing all of the spoils he gathered in life. Sick of the charade, Captain Cortez drops the crying ghost act in his introduction and faces Mario as the giant floating skull he's become. A cold-blooded villain who robs innocents of life and loot, as he so elegantly puts it. After threatening to turn Mario's mustache into a bone polisher, the sinister skull lunges forth and the curtains rise to reveal his full skeletal glory. I'd say this is probably the coolest looking boss in the game, besides the tail dragons. Cortez's many arms allow him to quadruple wield a hook, a cutlass, a rapier, and a longsword he can stab and slash with. His second form creepily looks a little snake-like. He drops said weapons and his limbs so that he's reduced to only a body, with a long spine extending out from his bone pile, featuring an exposed core in his chest cavity. Cortez can intimidatingly charge up to throw a mess of spiky bones, but with a small amount of heart points per phase, you won't be sweating too much. At 0 HP, the pieces that make up this spooky scary skeleton begin to fall apart, and the light temporarily leaves his eyes as the head comes crashing down. It's not over yet though, as his last stand is a face-off, not just against his face, but also his now floating spirit swords. Luckily, both the weapons and his bones have become brittle, so in Goombella's words, it's time to give this tormented spirit some eternal rest. However, in a funny fake-out, winning the fight results in earning star points as usual, and the fiend shrinks like he's going to vamoose for good. But then the floating head just grows back to normal size for him, and explains that he can't die because he's already dead. His spirit is forever tied to the vast wealth that surrounds him. It's a good thing this Marauder is actually a pretty cool dude. Sure, you can't date him, but he actually helps Mario upon learning that he's not all that interested in stealing stolen booty. Except for the Sapphire Star, Cortez doesn't even care about anymore. The Koopa hero from earlier couldn't make it to his desired final resting place 1,000 years ago and was forced to settle for a dank cave because Cortez just had to steal the apparently unimpressive gem, keeping him alive. Well, what matters is that he's a sweetie in the afterlife, eventually offering to ferry Mario and friends to and from the island whenever they please. Using Goombella's area title here reveals that she wouldn't mind pocketing some of Cortez's treasure, which is funny because she yelled at Mario in Chapter 3 for suggesting they swipe Rockhawk's belt. Stealing is wrong, unless it's from pirates. Anyway, that's 5 crystal stars down with just 2 to go. So far, we've traveled the world via warp pipe, blimp, and sailboat, so what's next? Cannon? Nope, not yet. It's a train! Poshley Heights is where the next star lies. A rich neighborhood inhabited by Bumpties who miss their homeland Shiver City, which I guess is the Paper Mario universe equivalent to Canada, because they say things like, "Yeah, you betcha," and "A."
Canadians, they're the type of players I'm thinking about.
Like the N64 game, this penguin-filled chapter begins with a crime-solving theme. But thankfully, Mario isn't accused of murder this time. The only murder here is the Agatha Christie novel that likely very loosely inspired this on-rails segment. Vivian's big sister Beldam and her rowdy replacement Dupless sure do try though, by way of a death threat made to sound silly so that the writers could get away with a villain plotting to blow up a train. The smartly dressed big blue rat on board, and by smartly dressed I mean glasses and a handsome blue tie, is traveling for business purposes and happens to be transporting a strange new product from his company called Nitro Honey Syrup. Rather than restoring FP, it supposedly has the power to raise the dead. Instead of assembling a zombie army though, Beldam plans on mixing 2 other ingredients into this secret sauce to concoct a type of blasting jelly.
Careful with the blasting jelly.
With the time bomb, super bomb, and this yummy, sticky, gooey bomb, plus the cannon and a certain self-destruct sequence we'll see in Chapter 7, there are a lot more explosive plot elements in this game than I remembered there being. Not to worry though, as Mario puts the kibosh on this kaboom. However, another would-be killer lurks in the shadows of Riverside Station, the Smorgs. What are Smorgs, you may be asking? Well, I don't really have an answer to that, because I'm not entirely sure either. Do the developers even know? All we can glean is that they're these creatures who look and act like fuzzies, but don't speak in full sentences, only shouting the name of their species, and rather than fur, their bodies appear to be made of smog. Their origin is unknown, but because of the Shadow Sirens meddling in this chapter, my headcanon is that Beldam used some sort of black magic to create them from the train smokestack. And in fact, there was a rumor about an unused cutscene where Beldam summoned Smorg that, according to Reddit user PichuMaster3000, started in 2009 on a gaming forum and spread via the Paper Mario and Super Mario wikis, when a user by the name of Steuben Rubin claimed, without any proof, to own an early version of TTYD that wasn't the Paper Mario 2 demo disc. Steuben described the supposed cut Beldam sequence, among other changes between the final release and his alleged special copy dubbed Beta 9. Unfortunately, it turns out this was all a hoax that was only allowed to persist because Mr. Rubin was a bureaucrat on the Super Mario Wiki. There is sadly nothing in the final game or on the cutting room floor that actually suggests Smorg was summoned by the witch, besides this cut line that might not even be referring to Smorg. I just like to pretend it was the writer's intention as an explanation for how this one-off threat came to be and its motivation. I guess one thing the Smorgs have going for them, and why I'm even talking about this at all for Dark Aspects, is that because there's no reason given for their presence, they have this otherworldly alien quality that's sort of scary, as their apparent purpose is to cause chaos. The build-up to their attack on the train is pretty effectively unsettling too. On the morning of the infestation, Mario can explore each cabin like normal, but will very abnormally find no one else on board. Each room is empty where there were once guests, and even the driver finds things to be quite quiet. Like an oversized insect, a single Smorg pops onto the windshield, followed by a few more, and then enough to overtake every single window on the train, darkening the interior so the only thing you can see clearly are their glowing yellow eyes peering through the glass. If you try to buy anything from the gift shop at this time, you'll have to wake up the owner, who's blacked out on the ground. It's only until trekking all the way back to the caboose where you'll find the waitress and conductor being overtaken by the Cumulus Cretins. Shaking in fear, they explain that the two of them, and all of the other paying passengers, must have been stolen away in their sleep. As far as why exactly, again, that isn't explained. Their goal could be to consume as many people as possible, adding to their collective swarm, or it could just be that they like terrorizing innocents. Again, I think the Smorgs being a hive mind organism created by Beldam with the sole purpose of slowing down Mario would make a ton of sense. Nevertheless, climbing onto the roof reveals that copious amounts of these gross, flippy-floppy fellows have completely covered the XS Express. The countless cloud clumps then conjoin into one colossal entity, with reddish-colored Smorgs found in its center that can grow in size and seem to function as the heart or core of the main body. Tentacles sprout out of this core, mercilessly gripping its flailing victims while thrashing about. Its standard form consists of 3 appendages used to attack, but it can also reassemble into a large pincher claw, or mouth, depending on how you look at it, for a stronger damage output. Delivering the final blow will cause the miasma miscreants to let out a whimper and blow away like dust in the wind, freeing our eclectic traveler friends who are no doubt deeply disturbed from their harrowing experience. But how are you all faring? Did Smorg, Captain Cortez, or any other boss scare those of you who played the GameCube version as a kid? Did giving Waka irreparable brain damage and supposedly vanishing him forever cause you all to reevaluate your life choices? That's all I had for this episode of Dark Aspects of TTYD. I hope you'll join me next time for a tech talk all about Princess Peach's role in this story. And then, finally, an exploration of the horrors that lurk beyond the titular 1,000-year door. Bye for now.